everybody, and welcome to the video. Today we're going to be ranking all 34 Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. Deadpool just marked the 34th movie and the first rated R movie in the MCU. And happily to report that this movie is going to be very high up on this list today. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe to help me reach my goal of 10,000 subscribers. And also, thank you to everyone who got me to my 1,000 subscriber goal. I really never thought that would happen, but now let's get into the ranking. Number 34, Eternals. This is the only MCU movie I ever watched once, and there's a reason for that, because I hate this movie. All the characters honestly suck, and there's too many characters that you can't really pinpoint on a certain character at any certain point in time, and all the characters are totally underdeveloped. As well, the story is underdeveloped. It's too long of a movie, and it just goes on too long. There's too much dumb stuff that goes on. It takes too long to get going. Overall, a horrible movie, and one of my least favorite movies of all time, and easily my least favorite MCU movie. Let's move on to number 33. If Eternals was my least favorite MCU movie, number 33 is the movie I hate the most. That is Thor: Love and Thunder. Thor: Love and Thunder was a complete joke. They went from Thor: Ragnarok, a very serious, very comedic, awesome Thor movie, to the joke that we got that is Thor: Love and Thunder. This movie was entirely just dog shit and horrible humor of goats yelling, the Thor flying on his hammer. It was a disgrace to the character of Thor. Thor has always been rocky. They got peak Thor, and then they just did whatever they did. I hate this movie. They have Gore the God Butcher, who is a very evil and dark villain, and the most stupid, not funny, trying to be super funny MCU movie. The whole concept doesn't work. It is a horrible movie, and I hate this movie so much because I was hoping it would actually be a very, very good movie. And I was sold on the trailers. I thought I was going to be watching a very solid Thor movie, but obviously I was wrong. This is the worst Thor movie. Let's move on to the next one. 2. The Marvels. This movie is extremely forgettable. I wasn't a big fan of Captain Marvel, but I didn't hate the movie of Captain Marvel, but I didn't think there should have been a sequel. And then they threw Monica Rambeau in there and Miss Marvel in the sequel. And I just didn't really get the point of it, and I don't think it really did anything for the characters. I felt like it was a pointless movie, and that clearly indicated because the box office success towards this movie was horrible. Really, no one went to go see it. It was the biggest loss in Marvel cinematic history. The story is very forgettable. There's really no laughable or enjoyable moments, other than I kind of liked the post-credit scene where Monica Rambeau saw Beast. That was my favorite moment of the movie. That's all you need to know, that this movie is not a very good movie. It didn't do anything to really piss me off. It just really didn't serve a purpose, and it really wasn't enjoyable in any different element of any sort of category. That is why I don't like this movie that much. 31. Thor: The Dark World. I enjoy the cast and the characters in this film, besides the villain, because the villain is so forgettable, it is not even funny. The villain really has no perks or no emotion traits or really, and you don't even really understand the motive for what he is doing, so he has to be the worst villain in the entire MCU, hands down. But then you still have Chris Hemsworth as Thor, and that is actually a good Thor. They didn't make a complete joke out of him like they did in Thor: Love and Thunder. So I enjoy Chris Hemsworth as Thor in this movie. I enjoy Natalie Portman. I enjoy all the different characters mostly in this movie. I enjoyed the world. I just didn't really enjoy the story, and I didn't really enjoy the villain. It's not a movie I hate, and it's definitely not a movie I want to watch. Just the most dull movie in the entire MCU is Thor: Dark World. So let's move on. Number 30, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I'm surprisingly a very big fan of Ant-Man. I really loved the first Ant-Man movie, and I really do enjoy the second one. But the third one, man. The third one's a joke. So they introduce our new big bad Kang, and then they kill him off by ants. So, imagine Thanos was killed by ants. No one would find Thanos evil or menacing because he died by ants. I know it was a different variant, but, well, what are we doing? It was so stupid. They never had the character of Luis. Luis is the best character in this entire franchise of Ant-Man, and they don't even bring him in this movie. Another massive mistake. They have MODOK, who is just a complete and utter disgrace and one of the stupidest things I've ever seen. I like the Quantum Realm, but you don't need the Quantum Realm the whole time throughout the movie. So this movie really, really made me mad, and I'm happy that MCU has moved on from Kang, because whatever they did in this movie was a complete joke, and it just ruined the character of Kang, in my personal opinion. As well, the recasting for Cassie Lang wasn't good either. She was extremely annoying in this movie. The good parts about this movie was Paul Rudd as Ant-Man. Other than that, this movie was a joke. Number 29, The Incredible Hulk. This movie feels so different and out of place because it was made by Universal, and it has a total different story method and tone and vibe and energy to it. As well, the actor in Hulk in this movie was Ed Norton, and then later down the line they switched it to Mark Ruffalo. As well, this movie really serves no purpose to any later events in the MCU besides this movie. Like in Avengers, they kind of reintroduced the character of Hulk, and it feels completely different and feels like the first time we ever saw him. Some people don't even know the Incredible Hulk is in the MCU. It is that different and weird, and this movie really doesn't do anything for me. I enjoy the third act battle, but everything before that is kind of slow, and it takes a long time to get to the third act, and there's not really enough action in this movie to make me like it at all. So that's why it's coming in at number 29. Number 28, Black Widow. First issue with this movie is that Black Widow died in Phase 3, and this movie was in Phase 4. So this movie came out after the character of Black Widow already died in Avengers Endgame. Spoiler alert, if you're mad at me, you can be mad at me all you want. If you've never seen Avengers Endgame, that is your personal fault, and that's not mine. So this movie was supposed to come out in Phase 3. It never really happened, so everything with the character of Black Widow in this movie felt kind of pointless. The villains here were abysmal. The third act was a CGI mess. I do like the introduction of Black Widow's family. Florence Pugh as Black Widow's sister is a great character, and I'm very excited to see what they do with her next in the MCU. Red Guardian is one of the funnier and better introductions to Phase 4. He's a very, very solid character. I'm also very excited to see in the near future. Other than those two characters and a couple decent moments with Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow, this movie is not good. That is why it is coming in at number 28. Number 27, Captain Marvel. While I do find this movie to be not the best, and I do think it is overhated because everyone just hates on Brie Larson. I also hate on Brie Larson. I don't like her, and I don't particularly like the character of Captain Marvel because she's too powerful, and she is honestly kind of annoying. So with all that said, you have Samuel Jackson playing a young Nick Fury, and that is great. That carries the movie. I love Samuel Jackson, and I love what they did with him in this movie. Very intriguing. You get more lore and expansion of the character of Nick Fury. So I'm totally on board with that. I really enjoy the villains of Skrulls, but they're not really the villains. I think they're a very cool concept. There were some solid action sequences in there. I wasn't a fan of the origin story of Captain Marvel, but I didn't hate it. There were some good moments. I liked Monica Rambeau in this movie. This movie didn't really hit on the emotional level, but definitely had some cool action sequences and definitely had some solid characters. So now let's move on. For 26, Thor. I obviously love Chris Hemsworth as Thor, and this really wasn't a proper origin story, but it did have a pretty impact on how Thor was changing as a person, because he's straight up just an asshole in the beginning of the movie. Then he gets sent to Earth by his father, and he doesn't become this asshole guy that only wants to seek war. He kind of finds himself as who he is and becomes the rightful hero and the rightful king of Asgard in this movie. This movie totally lacks a good third act because Loki controls this robot to fight him in the third act, which I thought was kind of stupid. This movie was surprisingly funny, and it was a nice introduction to the character of Hawkeye. Also, he was kind of a cameo and a tease in this movie, but it was nice to see him in this movie as his first appearance in the MCU. And a lot of the side characters, some of them were good, like Natalie Portman and Jane Foster, but Thor's friends from Asgard were kind of irrelevant. I don't remember their names, and they didn't really serve a purpose. It was cool to see Asgard, but this movie was bland. It didn't suck. It really just had a lot of the early MCU growing pains in it. That is why it's not that high up on this list. 25, Iron Man 2. Obviously, I love Robert Downey Jr. as the character of Iron Man, and I enjoyed the new introduction we got to Black Widow and the proper introduction we got with Nick Fury. So it had some nice moments there. I do enjoy a lot of the characters here. Happy, Pepper Potts are also great in this movie. But this movie only had 2 years to be made when the director of the film, Jon Favreau, who plays Happy, said it needs at least 3. So this movie had too many concepts and too many ideas that felt underdeveloped and overproduced at the same time. It felt like they just were trying to do too much and they clearly didn't have enough time to do it. The story wasn't that good. It was totally rushed. I didn't really enjoy the villains. It definitely had some cool action sequences. I do enjoy the third act. But overall, a underdeveloped MCU movie with early MCU Phase 1 growing pains. Once again, when I go back to rewatch it, I do have some fun with this movie. Number 24, Iron Man 3. This movie's weird because, in a sense, it almost feels like they're closing off Iron Man's story, but then he obviously comes to return in several more movies after this one, and they really didn't know if this was going to be the end of Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man. Luckily for us, it wasn't. So it kind of was a small close-off to the character. It felt like a more developed story with a little bit better of a villain. I wasn't a fan of the Mandarin twist. It doesn't piss me off as much as other people. But this movie doesn't really do anything special or unique or really original to really catch my attention. It's not a movie I ever tend to rewatch. It's not a movie that pisses me off, and it's not a movie I love. It's kind of just a mediocre movie. But obviously Robert Downey Jr. is incredible. It is honestly kind of forgettable. So let's move on. 23, Ant-Man and the Wasp. I love Paul Rudd as Ant-Man. He's one of my favorite MCU characters. This movie actually has Luis in it, which is a very, very good thing because I love Luis. He is so funny. It was cool to see Wasp in her actual costume in this movie for the first time. The villain of Ghost is pretty stupid. This movie is kind of just a small solo movie in a way that they did this movie right after Avengers Infinity War, so they made a small project that really didn't upset anyone but really didn't set the world on fire either. It's a fun small MacGuffin story, and I don't hate this movie at all. It's a fun movie that makes me laugh, but it really doesn't serve a big purpose to the overall MCU idea or overall story arcs. Number 22, the disappointing Doctor Strange sequel, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. This movie is not a Multiverse of Madness. It does not live up to the title. There's not enough of Multiverse of Madness that's crazy enough or berserkers enough that lives up to that title, obviously. I do love Doctor Strange as a character, and I don't hate this movie. I like the different take they went with Wanda being evil and taking the Darkhold and making her the Scarlet Witch. I thought some of that stuff was compelling. This movie was totally too woke for me. It had too many ideas and agenda things that were just trying to throw at you and really get its point across with some of the things they do. I don't like the character of American Chavez. She's really annoying. This movie doesn't really look pleasing. I'm not a person that normally complains about the way movies look. It just doesn't look good. It doesn't look like the CGI is really completely to the level of some of the other MCU movies. Also teased some characters like Mr. Fantastic and Professor X, and then they just killed them off. So I thought that was completely useless. Had some good moments, had some creepy different elements to it, but overall, a movie that I don't think really knew what it was trying to be, and they had too many ideas, and they just tried to throw their woke agenda at us too much in this movie. So I don't really love this movie, but I did have some nice moments. So now let's move on. 21, Spider-Man Far From Home. Don't get me wrong, this movie has some good elements. I like that it's unique and different from the rest of the Spider-Man movies because it doesn't take place in America. I do really enjoy the character of Mysterio. I think Jake Gyllenhaal had a wonderful performance as the character of Mysterio. But this movie has weird plot holes. You're telling me Iron Man left his super powerful glasses to a high school student in his will while the high school student was dead, and Iron Man thought he was dead because he was snapped at the time, and then Iron Man died right when he came back, so that doesn't make sense. That's a big plot hole, and that really annoys me. And then you have this random character telling Peter Parker to take his clothes off. If people make a joke if you switched that there, and you had Samuel Jackson telling MJ to take her clothes off, everyone would be freaking out about that sequence. It's a weird moment, and I don't think it really had a purpose or a overall reason for it, that to be in the movie. So a lot of weird moments, but I had some fun with the movie, some great moments, and a very nice, pleasing, solid MCU movie. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. All the Guardians of the Galaxy movies are so hilarious, and they tend to actually have solid villains. I don't hate the villain of Ego. He's pretty solid overall. But they do things with Peter Quill where they make and hint that he has more powers as a Celestial or whatever, but they never use that stuff later on, so I thought that was kind of useless. The introduction of Drax and Mantis' relationship was kind of annoying because Drax just pretty much bullied her, and then they kind of fixed that later on in the holiday special in Volume 3 where they actually have a nice relationship. So their relationship in this movie kind of sucked. I do enjoy the third act. I just felt like the middle portion of this movie was kind of weak and kind of slow. I just felt like we didn't really get to the final act too quickly. And the third act twist was obviously going to happen. Ego was obviously evil. That was pretty blatant throughout the entire movie. Definitely funny, definitely had some peak emotions and some peak moments. So, once again, a very solid MCU movie. Shang-Chi, The Legend of the Ten Rings. This is one of my favorite characters that they introduced in the multiverse saga so far. This feels very unique and different from the entire MCU. It's a very good original project that I'm very excited to see the sequel. I enjoy a lot of the characters. I enjoy what they did with the Mandarin with making him this kind of joke character once again in this movie. I really enjoyed the villain. I enjoyed a lot of the action sequences. Some of it was too CGI for me. I really enjoyed it as a martial arts film. Overall, a very solid film, but it doesn't really try to shoot for the stars, and that is a good thing. It just tries to get a double, and it definitely gets a double in my opinion. A very, very good MCU movie. Number 18, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. This movie was totally dealt the worst hand in the MCU because it took place during COVID. They made the movie during COVID. It was released during COVID as well. This movie had their lead actor, Chadwick Boseman, obviously tragically pass away. He was an absolute legend and absolutely amazing in the character of Black Panther. But I do like they gave justice to the life of Chadwick Boseman and the character of Black Panther. They didn't really cheap any of it, and it was a really depressing movie because they literally had a funeral in the movie. The movie felt like an entire funeral. I will say the movie was 20 minutes too long. It was a little too long. It did overstay its welcome, so that was kind of annoying, but I did enjoy the character of Namor, and all the side characters definitely stepped up and really came to the plate to make this a good MCU movie. It's not a movie I want to rewatch because it's kind of long and it's very depressing, but overall, a very, very great MCU movie that really didn't tarnish the legacy of Chadwick Boseman at all, so that made me very happy. And I'm very excited to see some of these characters in the future of the MCU as well, especially Namor and especially Shuri, who took the mantle of Black Panther. 17, Ant-Man. I love Paul Rudd of Ant-Man. He's the funniest character in the entire MCU until Deadpool, but we'll get to that later on. He's a great character, and I think he plays the character very well. It literally feels like Ant-Man and Paul Rudd are like the same person in a sense, if that makes any sense. Luis is hilarious. I love the character of Luis. I'm always going to be raving about him. I love how small and simple this story is. It's just a small heist story. All the characters are good. It doesn't try to shoot for the stars. It's a small, solo story that I think it really works, and that's why I think Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania doesn't work. I feel like they just try to make too big of a story, while Ant-Man's stories are supposed to be small because he is small. So I really enjoyed it. A very fun and a very rewatchable MCU movie. 16, Doctor Strange. I love the character of Doctor Strange. I love the origin of Doctor Strange. How he's kind of this narcissistic asshole who finds himself and actually becomes the sorcerer of the Time Stone and actually becomes a good person by the end of the movie. He's kind of like the second-tiered Iron Man, being kind of an asshole character, but being very likable at the same time, if that makes any sense. This movie is visually very pleasing. I love all the trippy stuff it does. I don't really enjoy the villains, and I don't really enjoy the third act, but overall, a very solid MCU movie that I do find particularly very rewatchable. 15. Captain America: The First Avenger. This movie feels very unique. It's the only wartime movie where it takes place during World War II. Chris Evans totally knocks it out of the park as the character of Captain America. I love what the character of Captain America stands for, being the scrawny guy who gets the super serum and becomes this super soldier. I do really enjoy the character of Red Skull. Overall, a great origin story, and I really don't have much to complain about this movie. A very great start to the character of Captain America in one of the best early MCU movies, in my opinion. So now let's move on. Number 14, Avengers: Age of Ultron. I'm totally a sucker for these big team-up movies, and this is obviously a testament to that. I love all these characters coming together. It always makes me happy to see it. This movie is totally overhated. I think the character and villain of Ultron is a very solid villain as well. I like the introduction of Vision and Wanda and Quicksilver in this movie. In this movie, the Avengers actually feel like a family. They obviously have their struggles and they have their different opinions, and they're very different people. It's very funny, and I enjoyed the family aspect, like I said. I enjoy Ultron, and I really feel like people just overhate this movie. It might not be as good as the Avengers. It might not have as emotional and peak moments as the Avengers, but it's a great movie. I don't know why people hate this movie. It is a very, very good movie. There's so many great moments. I hate why people hate on this movie. Let's move on. 13, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This is a perfect close to the trilogy and a perfect send-off to the characters. It ends on a very high and emotional moment. It kind of feels like you're graduating high school in a sense that you're excited for the future, but you're sad that everything has come to an end in this movie. That's the best way for me to explain it. All the characters are awesome. Everyone knows everyone loves the characters. I really love what they did with the characters. Everyone was expecting them to kill someone. They really didn't kill anyone. I liked how they put Rocket in the focal point, and they really went deep and did a deep dive on his origin story. It is very dark and depressing, to be honest. This movie can be very depressing. A lot of people were crying when I went to go see this movie. I wasn't crying, but it was a sad movie. I'm not going to lie. And I really can't complain. Very funny. The first MCU F-bomb, so that's always going to be an iconic moment. A really great MCU movie. And the fact that this movie is ranked number 13, and I love this movie, it's easily probably a 9 out of 10, and it is number 13, is a testament to how great the MCU is. I love Spider-Man Homecoming. I love what Tom Holland brings to the character, but it just didn't shoot for the stars like some of these movies later down the list, and we've seen Spider-Man over and over again. So that's why this movie is coming in at a number 12, even though I love this movie. Number 11, Thor Ragnarok. This is the first time Thor was actually good in his movie. They really nailed the character of Thor in this movie, making him very comedic, but very dark and gritty at the same time. It was really fun. It was a really funny movie that really had a different tone and vibe from the rest of the MCU. The battle between him and Hulk was awesome. I enjoyed the soundtrack very, very much in this movie. I love how they ended this movie. I loved how this movie brought us right to Avengers Infinity War. Overall, a phenomenal Thor movie. They really cracked the code here. And then obviously with Thor Love and Thunder, they just undid everything that was great about this movie and just made it a complete joke. I love Thor Ragnarok, and a lot of people have it very high up on their list, even higher than I do at number 11. So let's move on. Number 10. Iron Man. This movie kickstarted all back in 2008. Robert Downey Jr. is obviously once again amazing as the character of Iron Man. This movie set the tone and the vibe and the comedic level that these movies are going to be made and based off of. If this movie wasn't a hit, we probably wouldn't have 34 MCU movies and it wouldn't be what it is today. And honestly, the whole superhero genre would probably look a lot different as well. DC might be better than Marvel if this movie wasn't a hit. It's a great movie, very rewatchable. The third act is not the great, but it feels small in a sense because it was the first movie and they were really just trying to feel what this universe was about and what the character of Iron Man was. And I love it. There's so many great and iconic moments throughout this movie. And this movie is going to go down in history as one of the most important movies in cinema history. So now let's move on to number 9. 9, Black Panther. This is one of my favorite MCU movies, obviously, because it's in my top 10. This movie tends to fluctuate between my top 10. Sometimes it'll be number 5. Sometimes it'll be number 10. Just kind of moves around a lot, depending on how I feel about this movie at the current time. So, Chadwick Boseman's Black Panther is one of the best MCU performances by far. Everything that we got from him feels special because he tragically passed away. I love how different this movie feels. I love the world of Wakanda. I love all the characters very, very much. There's a lot of emotional and strong moments throughout this film as well. A lot of people try to nitpick this movie and say the CGI and the third act looks stupid. I don't know what people are talking about. I love the third act. I love the villain of Killmonger. He's probably a top 5 MCU villain. I love the score. I love Ryan Coogler's idea and mindset and visual take on this movie. It is a perfect movie in my opinion. Honestly, all top 10 of these MCU movies, I really wouldn't say anything is particularly negatively bad about any of these movies. Number 8, Captain America the Winter Soldier. There was a point in time where I found this to not be that good. I thought it was the most overrated MCU movie, but then I rewatched it when I rewatched all these movies and it skyrocketed up my ranking. This movie is awesome. I love Captain America. I love Falcon. I love Black Widow. I love Bucky. I love Samuel Jackson. 5 top-notch characters in this movie. I love the spy thrillerness. I love the action. I love just how it's the most pure action thriller movie that we've had in the entire MCU. I love the spy elements. I love the third act. I love the beginning. It is a great movie. I think it is one of the most well-written MCU movies by far. Also, I can see this movie even moving higher up on my list as time goes on. 7, the movie we have all been waiting for, Deadpool and Wolverine. Don't be worried, there's going to be no spoilers in this video about Deadpool and Wolverine, only stuff that we've known about the trailer. So I've seen Deadpool and Wolverine 3.5 times. You might be wondering, 3.5? Yeah, I went to go see it at 1 a.m. or 12 a.m., whatever, today, technically. And then halfway through the movie, the screen turned off, the fire alarm must have been pulled, and they sent everyone home because it was late. So I only got to see it 3.5 times, and that's whatever. This is hands down the funniest movie in the MCU. It's not even close. Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool and Wolverine are awesome. I love their on-screen chemistry and banter. This movie had a lot of jaw-dropping moments, a lot of shocking things that I wasn't speculating. It was able to definitely hide its great cameos that people weren't even really predicting about. It is what Multiverse of Madness should have been. This movie should be called Deadpool Wolverine, Multiverse of Madness. That's what this title it lived up to the Multiverse of Madness title, in my opinion. I don't want to talk about too much because I don't really want to spoil anything. I've talked about this movie a lot recently in my reviews, but I fucking love this movie. I am so happy that this movie is great. It makes me so happy. And I can't wait for the future of the MCU. And now because of Deadpool and Wolverine, it might not have saved the MCU, but it definitely set it back on track to making good content, hopefully in the near future. Next, Spider-Man No Way Home. This is a very special movie. I will never forget how the audience and the hype was for this movie, and how everyone knew Andrew and Tobey Maguire were coming back as Spider-Man, but we never really knew, so we were all like kind of having... We were like 98% sure that it was going to happen. We never believed it until we really saw it, even though it was happening. Having all the villains coming together, have the three Spider-Man coming together, was always a special moment. And I'll always cherish this movie. This movie hasn't aged that well to most people. People are starting to find issues with the story. I still love it. It's still a very, very special movie in my personal opinion. And I don't think the story is particularly bad. Aunt May dies. You kind of have Spider-Man going through this crisis of his aunt dying. And he's just trying to find himself. And it kind of sets Spider-Man to a new path at the end of the movie. I don't think this is a bad story at all. I don't know what people are talking about. Someone said it on the internet, and then people just started copying it. That's all I think that was. But overall, a great MCU movie, without a doubt. 5, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. I love the core of the Guardians of the Galaxy of Star-Lord, Gamora, Drax, Groot, and Rocket. Those 5 people on screen together, I love it so much. It's a very funny movie. It has the best soundtrack in the MCU, and it's not even close. Some great action sequences. I love how it feels like it's in space. It feels like a movie that is closest to Star Wars since like the Star Wars original trilogy, in my opinion. Has a very Star Wars vibe to it, which is very nice as well. I love the color pattern. I love just how unpredictable of a movie it is. I love how these are D-list characters that now are A-list characters because James Gunn really know how to write compelling, non-interesting characters at the same time. Where all these characters were just like bottom of the tier characters and comic book characters, and now everyone knows who they are and everyone loves them. It's a super fun movie. It's a roller coaster of a ride, and I love this movie. And I love the ride at Disney World that they copied and based it off of. So let's move on to number 4. Captain America: The Civil War. So as a Captain America movie, it is great. As an Avengers movie, it is great even though it's not an Avengers movie. Everyone knows this movie is Avengers 2.5, and it really set the stone of how Avengers Infinity War and Endgame would have went. Because if Iron Man and Captain America didn't fight and weren't on different terms, does Thanos win? Probably not. Big difference. So that really set the stone of the overall story arc of how these movies are going to be made. Obviously, we have the epic battle between Team Cap and Team Iron Man. I'm personally Team Cap, but I think both actually have good reasons to what they were doing. So I could see both sides a little bit. I love those characters. I love seeing the epic battle. I love the third act. I love the story. I love how dark it is. It is a top tier MCU movie without a doubt. Let's move on to number 3. Avengers. This is the first super successful team-up movie. I love all 6 of the original Avengers. Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Hulk, Black Widow, and Hawkeye. I love how Nick Fury assembled this team. I loved how Loki was the villain. I liked how they were a odd bunch at first that really weren't working together very well, and then they finally came together for the bigger cause to save New York and the entire universe from the Chitauri that Loki was controlling. It's a great movie. Some great moments throughout this movie. I really do love the Avengers. And I hate how some of these people that don't love the Avengers. I think it's a top-notch MCU movie. I feel like it's a little underrated. I love this movie very much. Number 2, Avengers Endgame. A perfect close to the Infinity Saga. It just closed everything out so nicely. You have Robert Downey Jr. passing. You have Chris Evans changing the mantle and giving it to Falcon and pretty much dying. You have Thor moving on kind of to a different light, and then they obviously ruined that. Wasn't happy about that, but that's not this movie's fault. Some super emotional moments. You have Captain America picking up Mjolnir for the first time. You have all the people coming back. It's a great movie. I don't think I really have to say much. Everyone knows how great this movie is. I'm going to talk about the first hour. I think the first hour is great. People say the first hour is boring. People are just haters. The first hour is awesome. I love how it has time traveling aspects to it. I love the whole Infinity Stone idea. I love Thanos. I love the battles. I think this movie is awesome. That's why it's coming in at number 2. But everyone probably expected my number 1 selection to be Avengers Infinity War, and that would be correct. This movie is awesome because the good guys actually die. And the fight sequence between Thanos feels special because the stuff you get with Thanos and this movie feels so much different from the Thanos battles we get in the Avengers Endgame because it feels more separate, small battles, which I think are very good. The Avengers are split up. They have multiple battles going on at the same time. I think this movie was written so well, and they really knew what to do with every single one of these characters. And I really liked the people they kept and the people they didn't kept. The only thing I would change is that I wish they kept Black Panther, because Chadwick Boseman obviously died and I wanted to see more of him. But I get why they killed him, because they were making him the main focal point of the future of the MCU, essentially. So I get why they killed him off, because the characters they kept were mainly all the OG characters. I love Avengers Infinity War, and I don't think I have to say anything more. Thank you so much for watching. I would love to see your list in the comment section down below. And I'd also want to see your opinions about Deadpool and Wolverine. And if you've seen the movie already, please subscribe to help me reach my goal of 10,000 subscribers. And have a wonderful day.